Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I'm sitting with Jeff Pisoni of Pisoni Family Wines. Welcome, Jeff, and tell everyone a little bit about Pisoni Family Vineyards.
Thank you, Allison. It's a pleasure to be here and share some of our story and wines. So, Pisoni Family Vineyards, we've been farming for 3 generations in the Salinas Valley of Monterey County. We were founded by my father in terms of grapevine planting in 1982. So really what we're doing is growing mostly Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, a little bit of Syrah in the Santa Lucia Highlands, which is one of the coastal mountain ranges in Monterey. And what I think of most when I think of, how we came to become grape growers and winemakers is the story of my father's journey in terms of planting grapevines, when he did and where he did. So my father was a wine collector when he started collecting wine when he got out of college in the 70s, and which from my brother and my point of view, I think is a great time because he collected a lot of Bordeaux at the time, and we were fortunate
Very lucky.
enough that, he saved some so that we could drink them and, be exposed to those and taste them when we were growing up. So he was collecting wine, and as an avid wine enthusiast, he wanted to make his own wine as well. At the time, he didn't have any grapevines, so he would go around to local vineyards in the area, different varieties at the time, and harvest grapes himself, make the wine at home. So he was a home winemaker, just following his passion. And his passion for wine was on a big scale. Mm-hmm. If you met my father, everything he does is on a very big scale. So he would make wine as several barrels, 15 barrels a year, which is quite a bit for in his garage, quite a bit for a home winemaker. But he had a lot of friends, and even more friends after he started making wine. So he would make wine, and he just loved everything about it. He loved the wine. He loved our region. He loved the sharing aspect about it in terms of what it does for, bringing the community together, his friends. And he wanted to plant his own grapes. So my grandparents started farming in about 1951. As soon as my grandfather got back from service in World War II, he started farming, and my family had a ranch outside Gonzales, which originally was dairy. And then he started farming vegetables, which, of course, all this is very different context, different land from the vineyards. This is all valley floor land in Salinas Valley, which is now known as the salad bowl of the world. America is we have a beautiful climate and soil for growing lettuce and a lot of vegetables there. So my grandparents started farming in the 50s, and my father grew up farming as well. And he didn't love the farming vegetable aspect of it as much. He was always more in. So my grandparents had bought a cattle ranch up in the mountains in what is now Santa Lucia Highlands in 1979. And they planned on just having some cattle up there, maybe retiring. And my father, of course, had very different ideas. So when he saw that, he loved our climate. It's very foggy, it's very windy, it's very cool. And that's also in the different soil zone, which is how lettuce is grown in the area. But my father saw that and he said, hey, this is beautiful land for grapevines. He knew from his, collecting wines across Europe, the value of having grapevines grown on the mountainside where the vines are stressed more, and the concentrated fruit you get from that. And of course, the climate. So he planted his first 5 acres on that mountain ranch in 1982. And at the time, there were a couple other vineyards, namely Talbot Sleepy Hollow. Our neighbor Rich Smith was growing grapes. Smith and Hook was there. But there were not many others. Morgan Winery was getting started or has started, but there weren't many. So I think about my dad in terms of one of these people in these areas that are planting grapes and taking this adventurous task of taking the risk and going somewhere that's not charted yet to plant grapes. And kind of like other examples of this, a lot of people were saying he's crazy. My grandparents were saying he's crazy many times. He would not listen to them. He wouldn't listen to anyone, which is great, and but incredible. So he went there, planted some grapes, at the time, there was no water on the ranch. So the Salinas Valley has, fortunately, a very, remarkable water source below it, big reservoirs, which goes into the structure and the geology of Monterey County and how the landmass was formed and used to be ocean running through, or at one point was in Monterey County. So a lot of water collects now in what is Salinas Valley reservoirs. But up in the mountains, you have the coastal range, which is the uplifted range of different geologic formations. On our range, it's granite. So you don't have water easily when you go up there. So this 5-acre vineyard that my dad had planted was a variety of different plant material. He had Pinot Noir, which he loved. He had some Chardonnay, and he also planted Cabernet because in the 80s, Cabernet was extremely popular and everyone planted it no matter where you were. So in order to get water, he would drive a water truck from the valley floor. He would fill it up and then drive up to the mountains. It's like a 30-minute trip, especially with a water truck. It's slow. Irrigate the vines, come back, do it again a week or 2 weeks later. So it was a painstaking process. During this time, he was looking for other, places to drill and find water. And none of this, and he was doing this without the approval of my grandparents either. So my grandparents, we were accustomed to growing vegetables in very rich ground on the valley floor. Comes to grapevines in the mountains, my grandparents, we just didn't see that. It was a farming community. You didn't see people growing as much fruit in the mountains. And especially when it came to finding water. So my dad would do these things when they were out of town. So they would go on vacation, and my grandmother liked to gamble, so they'd go to Vegas. It's close and easy. They'd go for weekends and short trips several times per year. And my dad would have all these little opportunities to run up, and he would plant grapevines. They'd come back, they'd say, "Gary, what did you do?" And I'm impressed to this day that they ever even took vacations because he would do all these things. And it really went like that when he was drilling for water. So it's a rugged landscape, and today we have 40 acres planted in about 15 different blocks. So it's up on a very mountainous landscape. You have 2 acres here, 10 acres there, 1 acre here, which goes into the topography, because when my dad was looking for his original well to be able to irrigate the grapevines, he would drill in different spots. And he was trying to find it by a variety of ways. It was like the lowest spot on the ranch, thinking to be the Salinas Valley water source, but turned out not to be the case. Or finding water witchers, which would use dowsing, walking along with 2 wires and trying to find where they cross, which is, ultimately how we did find water, but it's a debatable process, but it worked. And so he went to the highest point of the ranch and did this water dowsing, found somebody that does the dowsing and did it. And it took a very particular well rig and ambitious well driller to drill a well, because some of the wells, and it took 6 of them. So 6 trips of my grandparents being out of town, by the way, too. So they would come back and they were vehemently opposed to these wells because it's expensive looking for water. If you find it, it's really expensive. Great, but in terms of casing the well and pumping the water out. So he found well drillers, some that would drill down and hit solid granite and be stuck. But this one gentleman took his well rig and went all the way up to the back of this canyon and drilled down. So the well ended up being 420 feet, but it was about 6 feet of soil. And then it was granite, solid granite the whole way down that these drill bits churned through. And when he got there, he got a lot of water, which was a miraculous well, especially in that part of the county, just because there isn't much other water around there. So at that time he planted, that was in 91, and then he started planting more grapevines.
Wow. So now you have 40 acres up in the Santa Lucia Highlands. You're doing all estate fruit. What is your total production? And I know you have a few different labels.
Yeah, so we make, what I've been describing is our Pisoni Vineyards, and it's 40 acres. We bottle that under our Pisoni Estate Pinot Noir. And we also make wine from a couple other vineyards. So in 1997, we partnered with another grower in the area, Gary Pisoni, and we planted the Gary's Vineyard. In 2006, we planted another vineyard, also with Gary Pisoni partnership, called the Sobranis Vineyard. So now what our production is growing grapes and making wine from these 3 vineyards, bottling wine under our Pisoni Estate Pinot Noir, and also Lucia, And Lucia represents, where Pisoni Estate is one Pinot Noir from our Pisoni Vineyards, Lucia is Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Syrah from all three.
And then you have Lucy.
And then we have Lucy. Lucy is a single bottling each year of rosé. And of Lucy, we created a different label for it. We donate $1 of each bottle sold to breast cancer research, but it's still estate-driven rosé.
So drinking wine for a good cause.
Exactly.
And the total case production?
Total case production of each one, I guess, is Pisoni Estate is 700 to 800 cases per year. Lucia is about 5,000 cases per year. And Lucia ultimately is 7 to 8 different wines. And Lucy Rosé, we make about 1,000 cases.
And where are the wines available? Can people find them across the country?
Yeah, wines are across the country. We sell via mailing list, and we also sell in distribution. We have markets across the country in limited amounts because when we spread it out, there's not a lot to go around.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about you as a winemaker growing up in this. What is your first memory relevant to wine?
My first memory relevant to wine was always around. I really remember as a toddler, infant growing up, Dad was making wine at home, so I was around that. My brother and I were both participating in as much as, being in the tanks or stomping grapes. I remember Christmas cards of my brother and I in our underwear being sent out. I remember my brother and I making wine in mason jars. And, so we were always around it. So I was always aware of it. Granted at the time we were farming vegetables as well. And most of our summer jobs were working in the vegetable field, still on the family business, farm, which looking back, I feel is really special. But wine was something we were always around.
And do you recall one of the most memorable or the occasion of that first or most memorable wine you ever drank?
One of the first most memorable wines, there were a lot. We're fortunate. Dad, we had a lot of them. But there was one really cool occasion where when Mark and I were young, and with Dad, we went to Fiji. We were very young, maybe 12 or 13. And when we were at an airport on the way, we were in Fiji or stopped in New Zealand or something. And we stop and we're having dinner, and Dad orders a bottle of Grange. I don't remember what year it was, but we were sitting there, and the sommelier comes over, pours wine for Dad, and asks if the kids are having wine too. We were 12 or 13. And I remember him being kind of surprised or, happily surprised they were asking. He says, absolutely.
That's a really good first memory. So if we were going to come to your home and head into your cellar, I know you said your dad collected a lot of wines. What would we find in your cellar at home?
It's diverse, but I think I collect more around, kind of somewhat like what he did too. When I think back on it, it's a lot of, in growing up drinking, a lot of Bordeaux, Burgundy, German Rieslings, what he did. I love wines from, when people talk about the quote unquote noble varieties of, Cabernet, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay. I think, I drink a lot, but my cellar focuses a lot around that. I think I love, Pinot Noir and Burgundy, and, because of what it brings in terms of representing individual terroirs, a lot of different bottlings, exploring different sites, and how that can be. Same with Chardonnay. I love the history and tradition of Bordeaux in terms of, what Bordeaux represents to the wine world, just in terms of history and experience and academia. So so a lot of French from these regions in California.
And when you were talking about noble grapes and different varieties, do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
I don't know. That's a tough one.
Wine Soundtrack, the voice of American wine growers and makers.
Okay, so here's another tough one. Scores and critics, what do you think of them?
Oh, I think it's important for the industry. I think I personally really enjoy it because I think, we taste our wines every year, all the time. But and obviously consumers do, and we get a lot of feedback from a lot of people, which is really special and appreciated. But I think it's absolutely important that, a neutral third party, I love it as a winemaker that a neutral third party comes in, tastes wines every year, because you get a great sense of feedback, consistent feedback from a reputable source that really knows what's going on there. They know the wine, they could report if it's, what the conditions of the year, you see that come out. And I think it's great. And I think for the industry as a whole, in terms of, that's what I like, but in terms of consumers, getting information from that too, I think is important.
So for you as a consumer, red, white, or rosé?
Red.
Still or sparkling?
Still.
Those are the easy questions, right? When you're, I've had the pleasure of tasting some of your wines over the years, and we're sitting here sipping the Lucy Rosé for a good cause right now. What do you think that someone who hasn't tasted your wine is missing out on?
I think they're missing out on a very special expression of Pinot Noir. And I speak to Pinot because that's the majority of what we make. But I think it's our Pinot Noir is, we could talk about the site and it represents where it's from, but to really convey that it's a mountain vineyard and the vines are very stressed, but it's also cold. So you get this very, rugged environment for grapes to grow with a long, slow, cool growing season. And what that brings is a Pinot Noir with more concentration and intensity, but still the aromatic vibrance and the acidity. So it's a very a lot of concentration, a lot of power, but a lot of finesse too. It's just a really special Pinot.
And when it comes to Pinot being such a versatile grape and something that pairs so well with food, as we know, how do you approach food and wine pairing? Is it Pinot with everything, or are there rules you follow? And
can be Pinot with everything. My dad has a saying he enjoys with food and wine pairings that he loves Pinot because it could go with meat, fish, or the bathtub.
Okay. So if space aliens were to land on your property, which of your wines would you want to present them with?
Oh, I'd probably show them our Pisoni estate Pinot. Got to send a message.
So I know that your brother is the one who spends more time. He's the grape grower. You're the winemaker. But in your experience growing up in a vineyard, working in this your whole life, approaching vintage, do you see more variation from year to year, or do you see more similarities? What are you looking for in a or what are you getting out of a vintage here in the Lucia Highlands?
I think on some level, I think if you study a region close enough, you'll always see a lot of variation. On some level, we're fortunate to be in a relatively consistent region. Partially because we don't get a lot of rainfall, for example. So we normally are able to get most of our harvest in before we get a lot of rain. But still, the closer you look and the more you strive to make incredible wines, you're gonna find, and the more you try to control it, you're gonna find a lot of variation. Mm-hmm. So, I certainly see that. Mark sees that in the vineyard. We do things to try to adapt to that, whether it's, shoot positioning and how we farm, soil work, and, adapting for rainfall, stuff like that. But I think there is a lot of variation, yeah.
And is there anything that you look for, any signs that will sort of predict what the outcome of a particular harvest will be?
Sure. It's very tough. I think it takes a lot. We measure a lot. So, we try, a lot of people, we make our wines in a very hands-off fashion. And we also like to measure a lot of stuff. I try to record a lot of data, both in the growing season. Well, Mark records the growing season data. We record a lot of wine chemistry, the phenolics and chemistry. But with that, a lot of it's for historical records. So we have on various past vintages. But during the season, we're watching this. We're watching a lot of weather data, seeing how long the season is, seeing what our temperature range is, and tasting the fruit as it goes. So I think a lot of your winemaking decisions are, influenced by the time you spend in the vineyard during the growing season. Mm-hmm. So as you're watching stuff, as harvest gets close, you're tasting the fruit, what you taste in tannins, what you see in development, how veraison is going fast or slow. These are all things that are helping you decide what to do fermentation-wise, fermentation length, aging programs, which is, so I think that's very apparent and very important as a part of winemaking.
And do you, as a family, or you and your brother or with your dad, have any traditions or good luck rituals that you do at the beginning of harvest?
We often get together when we're deciding when to harvest the first grapes is always a pretty tough decision. We often get together, we've sampled a lot, we've tasted a lot, but that final call, we go back and forth a lot. So a lot of joint animated discussions going on.
But no opening up a bottle of champagne over that first harvest or,
No.
not shaving for 3 months or
No.
for good luck.
Maybe a bottle of Pinot or rosé.
So when you were little, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Well, I went through a few different phases, but little, if I count from the time I was 14 or so, I decided I wanted to make wine. Younger than that, I had a few different things. One of them was paleontologist, which I still like collecting rocks, not dinosaur bones, but I like digging around in the dirt. So a few things, but early on, it was wine. I love chemistry and science. And I also used to love the art projects I used to work on as a kid and building things, creating things. So I feel like wine really combines all that. And when I was going into high school, I was already thinking and planning on it. And when when I was a senior in high school, I was deciding which wine school to go to. And my brother was going to school at Davis. He was studying ag economics. And I kind of wanted to, go a different route and do something different than my older brother. Mm-hmm. And so I went to Fresno State and went straight into an enology program. Huh. And my first commercial harvest, was that year. So when I was 18 years old. So I've worked every harvest since then.
It's great to know what you want to do when you're little and to be doing that still today.
Yeah, it is. Especially in wine, I feel like it's great to have anything, I guess, but wine has such a long time horizon. The time to plant vineyards and see the results and bottle wine and see the results takes a long time.
Yeah. So when you're not making wine and bottling and waiting, what are you doing for fun in your free time?
Well,
Do you have it?
I know, just a little bit. Right now, I'm building a treehouse for my kids.
Ah. How many kids do you have?
We have 2.
2 kids. So family time is your free time.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. And when you are planning a romantic evening with your wife, if you get those, because I'm sure your kids are young, what kind of wines are you pulling out to make that evening perfect?
It'll be, kind of like, what's in the cellar, but I have fun drinking, again, Bordeaux, Burgundy, California, Pinot. And romantic evenings with my wife, she worked in Bordeaux. She worked in the Rhone and Burgundy. So I try to find extra special bottlings from there, places she worked. Good excuse to try to impress her and share a good bottle of wine.
Still impressing her.
Yeah.
So thinking back, what would you say is the best piece of advice you ever received?
The best piece of advice? My dad gave me a book on one of, I think it was Clive Coates' book, Côte d'Or. And inside the front cover, he wrote, "The best winemakers are the most prepared and interfere the least." It's always been very memorable.
That's thought-provoking. It's deep.
Might have had a couple bottles of wine at the time he wrote that, maybe.
And if you could offer advice to our listeners today, what kind of advice would you like to share?
I think the most important thing is know what your what your goals are. What are you really trying to do? There's a lot of wine out there. There are a lot of different types of wine to make. And you have to know what your palate's looking for, know what you're tasting, so you know how to get there. And I think it's easy to get distracted by a lot of different regions and varieties and methods and ideas. But as long as you know what you're tasting and what you want to produce, I think that's really hard, but I think it's really important too.
And looking back on your career in wine, what would you say your proudest achievement to date is in your work?
I think my proudest achievement is the balance that my family finds in how we work and farm and make wine. I look back, there are countless bottles of wines that I love and would love to, think about, but over I think you read about how hard it is for family businesses to continue, and I think we're really lucky that my family, we all love what we do, and the dynamic that we have evolved into, and especially now with my brother farming and I making wine, it's a great balance. And I think it's that balance that really allows us to achieve and share the same vision and goal going forward.
That's a lovely dynamic. That is. And maybe your children will take over one day. So complete the sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
Pretty empty.
So, I always ask, if paparazzi were to snap a photo of somebody sitting in a restaurant drinking, someone famous, and your bottle was on that table. But I'm curious, who would you want drinking your wine, living or deceased? And it doesn't have to be a celebrity. Is there one person that you wish you could see with a bottle of your wine in their hand?
Let's see. Maybe President Obama. He's very worldly, like his philosophy on a lot of stuff. I know he drinks wine.
Okay. He does drink wine. And he's drunk a lot of California wines, in fact. So tell me, in all the time you've spent and you're drinking wine and you're tasting wines from all over, do you think that we'll be drinking wines in 300 years, 500 years?
I certainly hope so.
You don't have a pessimistic view on this.
No, I worry about global warming a lot, like a lot of people, but I certainly think we'll be making something in that down the road.
That's true. Should that not be the case and you had to end up on a deserted island, what are 3 bottles you would take with you?
3 bottles on a deserted island? I would take a lot of rosé, I think. It's going to be pretty warm there, even if I might not be able to cool it down.
It's your island, so there's refrigeration.
I would take some Pinot Noir, because it's going to, pair well with anything, so to speak.
From California or from anywhere? Or?
I'd take California. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be nostalgic, too. And I'd probably take something from Côte d'Aron, because I think it's just a fantastic... I think the quality you get in Côte d'Aron blends are great, great for the price. Wines to drink often.
Well, speaking of those wines, we play a fun little game here. You might not find it fun. You might find it a bit stressful. The pairing of wine and music, and how sometimes, I don't know if you listen to music while you're making wine. We listen to music while we're drinking and eating. And sometimes certain wines will conjure up different music, or you'll want different vibes. So based on your 3 island wines, what would you be listening to with rosé?
Something with a lot of energy. Probably some current, something uplifting.
Okay, and with Santa Lucia Highlands Pinot Noir.
Well, that'll be my dinner, late evening wine. So something relaxing, unwinding.
And your Côte d'Aron.
Côte d'Aron, I'm going back to more mellow music.
Like jazz or?
Yeah, maybe jazz sounds good.
Okay. So with, the world of wine out there, what's on the top of your list of a winemaking region you are planning to get to or would like to go visit? It's hard to, when we travel, we've been to France a few times. I often feel like it's hard not to go to France. I love so much of the wine regions, so many of the wine regions there and the wines there, and there's so many places to stop. So much diversity. So we'll probably be there next. Even though I love Austrian wines, would love to get there and visit, but with 2 kids, we don't travel as much anymore. But if you had a bucket list and you didn't have to worry about time or children or anything.
Oh, if I had a bucket list, then sure, I'd be all over the place. I'd be back in South Africa, because it's been way too long since I was there. I'd be in Austria. I'd be up and down the slopes of the Mosel. I love wine and love the diversity and thinking about wine in different regions. Portugal, I love sweet wine and dessert wines. I think they're underappreciated, so I'd certainly be there and checking that out. I know I would look forward to doing a lot more traveling.
Well, while you're dreaming about your traveling, people can come and visit you, right?
Yeah, they can, with notice. Okay. So we don't have a tasting room, but we'd be happy to receive, some customer, give us some notice ahead of time. We'd be happy to meet with you and show you around.
And otherwise, how can people find your wines? Website, where can we learn more about Pisoni family wines?
Yeah, online, our website, Pisoni Vineyards. We also maintain a blog site called PisoniNotes.com, where we go into more depth about what we're doing and some stories and talk about the wine.
Fantastic. So if we want to visit, we'll make an appointment. Otherwise, we'll find you online or in one of our local stores. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.